I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. It's 7:06 and it's August 16th, 2018. The first item on the agenda is the roll call. Commissioner Rainey.
Here.
Commissioner Lucas.
Here.
Commissioner Burks.
Here.
Vice Mayor Crutcher.
Here.
And then I'm present, so everybody's here. Second item on the agenda is the prayer and pledge, and Commissioner Lucas is going to lead us in the prayer, and then we'll go to the pledge.
If you'd bow your heads. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this evening, God. We thank you for all your blessings on our community, God. Be with us tonight, God, as we make decisions for the best of this community. And God, as our kids go back to school, we pray for each child, each teacher, each parent, God. Keep our children safe through this school year. Thank you for all your blessings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Third item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
We got a first and second. Any other additions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4 is public hearing, and we do not have a public hearing tonight. That'll take us to 5, citizens' comments. Do we have any tonight?
Yes, ma'am, we have 3. The first one is Miss Pat Thomas.
Okay. Hi, Ms. Thomas, if you'll come up and give your street address, and then you can go into your 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name's Pat Thomas, and the street address is 7491 Caney Fork Road. And hopefully some of you have been driven down Caney Fork Road. So, okay, now if Sissy is here, I've got some slides. I'd like to show 12 slides that were all taken within an hour. The topic tonight is runoff from Cumberland Estates. So there's 12 slides here that all were taken within 1 hour on June 29th of this year. What you're seeing in the first slide, I'm sorry, can we go back to that first one? Is the outflow from a retention pond. So Cumberland Estates is just beyond that outflow cement structure that you see there. And then this road flows into a pond that we're referring to as Rob's Pond, right, who will be speaking next. But there are several people that live on that. It's an unnamed creek. We'll call it Rob's Creek for now. Rob's Creek flows into Mangrum Hollow Creek, and then Mangrum Hollow flows into Caney Fork Creek, and that flows into the South Harpeth River. So next slide, please. This is also Rob's Creek, just probably a couple hundred yards from the first picture. We're going to take a little journey about 4 miles down this stream and end up at the South Harpeth. Next slide, please. This is also Rob's Creek, maybe another 100 yards, right before it hits Mangrum Hollow Creek. Next slide, please. Now this is a very compelling picture in my mind, because what you're looking at the top of the photograph is Mangrum Hollow Creek. And the bottom part is Rob's Creek flowing into Mangrum Hollow Creek. I should have stood right there at the junction and taken a picture upstream and downstream of Mangrum Hollow, but I didn't. But you'll see in a minute what happened by the time we get to Caney Fork Creek. So these pictures all were taken, as I said, within 1 hour, and it was about 24 hours after a very heavy rainstorm. You may even remember it because we've had such dry weather here, but we had a couple days of very heavy rains on the 27th and 28th of June. Okay, next slide, please. This is Mangrum Hollow Creek. This is right at the bridge. If you drive on Forest Glen, right before you get to King Road, there's a little dip in the road, and then it goes back up to King Road. That's at that bridge, so you can see the construction silt here in that area. Next slide, please. This is Caney Fork Road. This is the first bridge. It's in front of the Vanderlindens. So we've traveled about, this is about 1.5 miles from that first slide as the river flows. Next slide, please. This is the second bridge at Caney Fork Road, also on the Vanderlinden's property. So we're still traveling downstream down Caney Fork. Next slide, please. And this is the third bridge that you travel. You see those road bridges. So as you can see, Caney Fork full of construction still. My husband and I have lived there for 25 years, have never seen anything like this, including in the flood of 2010. And so we knew there was something going bad wrong here. That's why I went upstream to the project, took some pictures. Next slide, please. This is in front of our house. If you've driven down that road, you may remember there's one place that has a wooden bridge that goes across the driveway. So I'm standing on the wooden bridge, looking at the construction silt. Next slide, please. And this is the South Harpeth. There is not a good place to take a picture of where Caney Fork runs into the South Harpeth because it's back in the woods, hard to get to. You'd have to actually walk down the creek to find it. I suspect if you look at that previous picture of Caney Fork, this place is 2 miles downstream. It's taken at the bridge next to the three-way stop on Fernvale Road, if you know where that is. Near the old Shell station. Okay, so you can see the silt, and these are a little bit out of order, I'm sorry. This picture was taken, I took this picture because this is on our property, and it's about 100 yards from the picture that I took from our bridge. So you can see that even though this stream suffered the same rainfall, it's not full of anything because this is what a healthy stream looks like and should look like. And it was, again, this was taken within the same hour. This is a healthy stream, the other one's not, so it's a little bit out of order. Next slide. And I guess the point I wanted to make here is what you see in the South Harpeth obviously comes from the source. It comes from the construction silt that has been leaving Cumberland Estates. So that's it for the slides. The points I wanted to make in addition, and I know I only have 3 minutes here, so I'll try to sum it up quickly.
You're way past, but I'm going to let
Am
you
I
go.
already?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. What we need to understand here is there are some people who think, okay, it's just a little mud. But when it comes to streams, and I hope that there are enough people here that understand that, it's not just mud. This construction still destroys the aquatic life in the rivers. It destroys the rivers. So you start to see problems with the vegetation, the bugs, the little fish, and all of the animals that live in this environment begin to reduce in numbers because we're destroying the streams. The thing that's important to understand about this is Cumberland Estates has, Rob DeLaley, who's going to talk next, has been trying very diligently to raise this issue, and members of the Fernvale Community Action Group have gotten involved beginning back in February and March. We've been working with TDEC. Fairview doesn't have a stormwater ordinance. Fairview, I think, is relying on TDEC to enforce this, but what we have learned is TDEC really does not have the means to quickly enforce. It just doesn't work. They have the ability to issue notices of violation. Cumberland Estates got their first notice of violation in March. They were ordered back then to clean up Robb's Creek. Not only did they not clean it up, it degraded further because these were taken at the end of June. So yes, TDEC can enforce, but when you're talking about relying on TDEC to enforce, it takes months and months to get anything done, and in the meantime, our streams are destroyed. So what we're looking for is for the city of Fairview to look at what you would have to put in place. What cities can do that TDEC can't do is they can issue stop orders. All contractors understand stop orders. The enforcement process at TDEC is just too lengthy to be able to get their attention. So we are asking the city of Fairview to look at what would need to be put in place so that we can hold developers accountable to not destroy the streams around Fairview. I'm sure that everybody in this room would agree that this is not what we want. This is not what we can tolerate. We need our developers to understand you can do business in Fairview, but you cannot destroy the streams. And we need the city to involve themselves. Okay?
Thank you.
Next is Rob.
And Rob, if you'll give us your first and last name and your address, please.
Sure. Robert DeLillo. I reside at 7102 Porter Forest Lane off of Forest Glen, just adjacent to the Cumberland Estates property. Thank you for this opportunity. Nearly 3 years ago, I stood in front of this body and implored you not to let that development move forward. Nevertheless, it did, and immediately impacted the neighboring community and properties and property owners negatively, severely. July of 2017, they started clearing and stripping, and that's when the stormwater issues began. Not only did they leave track out on Cumberland Road and so on and so forth, but utterly destroyed my property with sediment and mud and runoff from their site. I've instantly got TDEC involved, my Fernvale neighbors involved to try to get this right. And I'll say this one, literally tons. I mean, she shows you just a glimpse. Miss Thomas here showed you those pictures. Those were just a snapshot of one day out of one big rainstorm. But I'm telling you, it was over and over. No matter the size of the storm, no matter the date, or it's been going on since July of 2017 and continues to this day. We've got TDEC involved. TDEC has limited resources, limited ways to manage and enforce. And TDEC has told us the best method to control this type of damage to the community is through local ordinances, all right? We talked with your city planner, Ms. Kristen Catanzaro. Forgive me if I messed up her name. But even she wants a stormwater ordinance, okay? The city of Fairview next week is planning to have a community gathering and talk about the comprehensive plan for the year 2020 and beyond. And city commissioner or city manager Scott Collins is quoted in the Tennessean is saying, successful growth starts with listening. Well, here I am again asking you to listen, and please do something to start some sort of city ordinance on stormwater and stormwater management, stormwater prevention, to prevent more destruction like that, quite frankly. It's upsetting, it's emotional for me because it's my own personal property, and now I've got to fight with the developer to get them to clean it, or to stop first, then to clean it, and hopefully not have it happen again. But now I'm worried about my neighbors. In the state of Tennessee, we have pristine waters, the Harpeth, the South Harpeth, and all of these waterways here in the Fairview and Fernvale area contribute to those pristine waters. Well, we're not going to have much longer if we keep this up. I'll just tell you that right now. So I just implore you guys, as you move forward into the 2020 planning and beyond that, we really need to consider it. And lastly, as far as the city of Fairview is concerned, please stop with the discount shopping centers, the Dollar Generals and the dirt cheaps and the burger joints. Please stop. You're just cheapening and ruining Fairview. Thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Lisa Anderson?
Okay. Ms. Anderson, if you'll come up and give your address, please.
My name's Lisa Anderson. I live at 7140 Cowles Creek Drive, Fairview, Tennessee. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. On the agenda tonight, the first item under new business is an item before the BOC regarding censure/removal of Dr. Neil Rice from the Park Board for what is called his being disrespectful and uncooperative towards City Manager Scott Collins at a couple of meetings. I've worked alongside Neil for 11 years now to help preserve the history of Fairview for future generations through the restoration and preservation of the historical property and the Triangle School and other buildings on the Triangle property across from the rec center here in Fairview. Neil is old school. When promises of funds to help this process are made by representatives of our city, he expects follow through, as he should. He is of the time when people had integrity and a handshake was their word. Unfortunately, this is not the case nowadays. Neil does not just ask the city for monetary help. He has written many grants that have been approved and funded, and Neil has invested more than $100,000 of his own money, time, materials to forward the project as well. Is Neil passionate? Absolutely. But without his passion, our future generations would not know about the Bowie sisters in regards to their donations of the property now zoned historic, which the Triangle School is located, and their desire for preserving nature and history for us and the future generations to enjoy and learn from at this site. Neil has had many long conversations with Evangeline Bowie and promised her that he would continue her vision to preserve nature and the history of this great city. The Triangle School was not only a school, but the home for the Bowie sisters. I believe that several of our BOC members can relate to being passionate about their own projects. These projects include preserving trees, the United Way, Habitat for Humanity, our Fairview Schools, Fairview Athletics, just to name a few. I know that funds have been sought for several of these projects recently and funded. I have also witnessed heated debates over the 14 years that I served the city and was involved in city government. Disrespect, heated debates, and no one was ever censured or removed. Why Neil Rice? Why now? To remove Dr. Neil Rice would be a mistake from the park board. There is no one more passionate about this project than him. Goals and dreams without passion are dead. I'm sure that I did not coin this phrase, but it is true. I will leave you with this. As Vice Chairman of the Historic Association, I'm excited about the historical village being open for tours. I asked the BOC members to see that some items that were approved by the BOC are handled first. Fencing the detention pond, which was man-made, not natural, as per our city regulations, needs to be done. This leaves us open for lawsuits if a child gets, injured in that pond. And it is also a requirement here in the city. And we want to do as a city what we ask developers to do. Security lights around the buildings, which should have already been installed. Adequate parking, including more spaces, meeting ADA requirements, are needed before tours can even be done safely. And finally, those of us who knew the Bowie sisters know that they would appreciate that their name be pronounced properly. It is Bowie, not Bowie. The sisters are the Bowie sisters. It's Bowie Park. It's not Bowie. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it, Ms. Johnson, for tonight? Okay, thank you. Okay. Awards and recognition. Do we have any tonight? Okay. Public announcements, and then it's already been mentioned about the community meeting. Do you want to just say a little bit about Monday's meeting?
Yes, Mayor, members of the commission. As you're aware, we have been working on comprehensive plan to do just what's been discussed previously to kind of help us grow forward, make sure we do that in a proper, correct, and beneficial manner for the community for years to come. The kickoff for that event is this coming Monday, August 20. It's going to be held at Marymount, or Camp Marymount at 6 p.m. It'll be till 8:30. It's kind of a come and go, but that's going to be an important meeting. We kind of want everyone, it's more of a meet and greet, and kind of get an idea of what the pulse of the community is going forward. So we just like to invite everyone to that. It's obviously open to the public. We look forward to having that be a successful event and hopefully be the start toward the next 10 months or so of a lot of work to get that plan complete.
Yeah, and we really do. If somebody's not watching or if they haven't read the paper, seen the flyers, if you'll please invite people just to raise awareness. the more people we can get there, the better off we are. More input and just keeping citizens involved. So, thank you for sharing that. The next item is staff comments. Any staff comments tonight? Would you like to share now kind of what you were sharing in the workshop, or you want to save that to comments just for the public about the issue of the runoff and your conversations? It could be later, whatever you think is appropriate.
I'll give you the information as I know it.
Yeah.
And trying to answer a couple of questions, and not for purposes of debate, but informational, just so you'll know kind of where we are and some of the things to go forward. Number one, I understand the concern and the request for the city to do this or that regarding that runoff, and that's a topic that will need to be looked at, and there is some regulation toward that, and I'll be brief as I explain what that is. As it has been explained to me, by the developer, it's been expressed to me that they recognize that there was some error, mistake in construction in other areas within that development and the detention ponds, and they are working with their engineer and with TDEC to make those improvements. I'm no engineer. I can't speak for them personally or from a business standpoint, but they have expressed to me both yesterday and today that they are actively working with TDEC to make those improvements and make those repairs. All of those improvements and repairs must be stamped by a certified engineer, PE, with their license. They also must be approved by TDEC prior to any construction or repair beginning. So there is some work to be done outside of that, and we want that to be successful. As it relates to the question of what the city can do, there are, and again, this is a brief description. This is not intended for a longevity or debate, because this is a topic that we could spend the rest of several nights discussing, but basically what we're talking about, if the city were to move forward with some sort of stormwater plan, MS4, municipal storm sewer system, that is a substantial project for any city. All municipalities, populations over 50,000 are required to have an MS4 plan and have MS4 staffing for that. Obviously, the city of Fairview is substantially less than 50,000, and you have to have the resources to implement that and make that be properly managed. It's not just as simple as implementing a plan. You're required to staff that plan. You're required to have on-staff inspectors, on-staff or on-call engineers, and manage your annual plan for all activity that takes place across the city for any of your stormwater runoff. So there are some things that can be done. But absent of making a substantial investment on behalf of the city, you're limited as what you can do without the cooperation of TDEC and those others. The second question that's come up is, can the city adopt the state's regulations for stormwater runoff and enforce those regulations? The answer to the question is you can. You would have to handle the enforcement part of that through the TDOT regulations. You could adopt the state's regulations for stormwater runoff, but you have to enforce them as a part of the state's regulations, unless you have one of your own that mirrors that, but that's just simply work multiplied for the same thing. So we have heard the complaints. We understand those questions. We obviously want to make sure that we get it right, but there is a process that goes through that's very technical, that's very time-consuming, and ultimately expensive to go through that. So I'm not saying that we don't want to do it. That may be something to be looked at as part of the comprehensive plan, but that's something that you have to plan for to implement appropriately and ensure its success.
Well, in the Planning Commission, when Will was presenting, we did have conversation about that when as the new codes. Now, I don't know what it compares to the state, but as we finish that up, obviously we'll have more conversations. Okay, any other staff? Especially since we have questions. Okay, next item is approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Any corrections or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. And that was, I didn't say consent agenda. Should I read that one now too? Okay, it's good enough. Okay, old business, second and final reading of ordinance 18-10.
An ordinance of the City of Fairview, Tennessee, adopting a schedule for the retention of municipal records. Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Any discussion? Do you want to give a briefing of what we're doing?
Yes, Mayor, members of the commission, what you have before you tonight is a second reading of the ordinance for our records retention. This is a document that is drafted, substantially copied from the MTAS model. We're required to have this. This was put together as a model of that, and there are no standard deviations from what that is. It's a simple operating procedure for the records.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to 12.
Point of order.
Oh,
Get a vote.
oh, I got so excited about the description. Okay, did I have a first and second, right? Okay, so we'll start out, Vice Mayor.
Aye.
Archer. Commissioner Rainey.
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas.
Aye.
Commissioner Burks.
Aye.
And my vote is aye. Motion carries. New business, 12A, Park Board member or censure removal request. Do we have a motion?
I would open discussion.
Second.
Okay, go ahead.
I ask that this agenda item be placed on tonight's agenda based upon an email from the chair of the Park Committee. Had a issue with a member. In reviewing this, I realized we don't really have, we don't have a process. What is the process if any of the committees or commissions have an issue with a member? And I think that's the first thing we need to look at. I have a couple of suggestions that we could look at. One suggestion would be, I believe there's a board member on every commission and or committee. And we could ask if there's an issue, have the chairman direct that to that board commissioner to bring it before us if it's something that can't be worked out. Otherwise, we can have a process where that commission chairperson requests that the Board of Commissioners attend their next regularly scheduled meeting. Again, we can't vote on anything there, but we can at least see what the dynamic is. And then if they still can't resolve it, then we can bring it up at the next meeting for discussion. That's the first issue I think we need to talk about tonight.
Okay.
I mean, Mayor, I think the first recommendation, because there is a Board of Commissioner on every one of those. So to me, it would seem much simpler process to approach that member and request that member bring it back to the board rather than having to wait for the entire board to attend one of those meetings and bring it back here.
So you're pretty much saying basically the board of, the member that's on the board would be the one to present it back if there was something that needed to be done or discussed with us?
Correct. I mean, the chairman could go to that member, because I think that that's one reason why there's one appointed to every board and commission, just for that simple purpose, is coming back to this board to report. And we do need a process. I mean, if we need a process to do any kind of removal or censure, I think that would be the simplest process.
Okay.
Mr. Collins, to put that process in place, do we need to have an ordinance or resolution to that effect? Or,
You could vote by resolution, but there would be certainly no reason for an ordinance. If you just want to establish amongst the board members that the policy is, if there's an issue within your respective boards where you're seated, that you simply have that matter brought to that member and have that member bring it back after an evaluation with the board. The individual board other than the Board of Commissioners.
Commissioner Burks, I think that all of the various boards that you have, the persons who are on those boards serve at the pleasure of the Board of Commissioners. That's the way I understand it. And so, what you're talking about is, how does it come before the Board of Commissioners? How is it brought to your attention? You know, certainly I think any board member who sits on the board of the various Parks Board or Planning Commission, whatever it might be, you have the right to bring that matter back to the full meeting yourself. You don't need prompted to do it. But I think Mr. Collins is right. You could pass a resolution that says that must be brought back, or could be brought back before you by the sitting board member on that body. That person must initiate it in some way, or that person must make the motion. You know, what you're talking about is the machinations for how it's going to get back before the BOC. Is that right?
Correct. It's just, if you have a clear process, it seems everybody knows it's easy to follow. Instead of someone wondering, well, I thought you were going to do it. It just seems it'd be nice to have something in place. Everyone knows, here's how we're going to deal with this stuff, as far as it getting before us.
Sort of stands to reason that if there's a problem with a member on one of these bodies, and it's brought before the BOC about maybe a member ought to be replaced, that BOC would look to the particular commissioner who sits on that body for guidance, right? I mean,
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Potter. I don't necessarily think there has to be any mechanism put in place for how it's viewed by this board or brought to this board's attention. I mean, in this case, as I understand how this ended up on the agenda, was the chairperson of the park board, I think, in an email reached out to all of the commissioners, and then you asked for it to be put on the agenda, which is fine. I happen to be the BOC member that sits on that board. I was at the last meeting. I can't speak. I had missed a couple of meetings because I had prior engagements with softball coaching this summer, but at the last meeting, the one in question, I was present. You know, is Dr. Rice, and I know we're not debating what actually happened, but I will just share this with the board because it may be helpful. Is Dr. Rice passionate about History Village? Absolutely. You know, I've sat on this board and had Dr. Rice come and ask for funding, and we've not always agreed on things, and that's fine. That's part of the process. You know, did he cross the line and do anything that I haven't seen over the past 4 years of serving? Not really. I didn't see anything. I mean, you know, I've seen meetings be disruptive. I've seen yelling and finger pointing on this board. I've seen people walk out. I mean, I've seen it all over the past 4 years. So, you know, a passionate debate or somebody coming in and two people not agreeing with one another and things getting heated, you know, what I saw at the park board, it didn't rise to that level. It was an individual. Could he have been more respectful? Perhaps. You know, it's something that he's passionate about. He's put a lot of work in. Again, I don't always agree with him, and that's fine. But I don't think anything he did rises to the level of removing him or censuring him. You know, I thought that our chairperson handled it well. He got control of the meeting, and we moved on. That was what I observed. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what I observed. So,
Mayor,
Yes.
is the chairperson here? So the email I got with the chairperson had sent was that basically, I got the impression he was saying he could not conduct productive meetings. Is that correct? Could he come up and speak?
It can't be productive as long as a lot of, what normally should
Yeah.
take 20 minutes turns out being a meeting, it's an hour.
Mr. Hendricks, would you, if you're going to talk, would you please come to speak? I'm fine if the rest of the board. But then also Dr. Rice is here, so we would need to allow him to speak too.
I mean, the email I received seemed to be you saying that it's very hard for you to conduct a meeting. Is that correct?
I didn't say very hard. The problem I had at this meeting was a second thing happened that me personally, I just don't tolerate, and that's rudeness and disrespect. Now, maybe my level of that is lower than other people. I don't know. I've led men in the military. I'm a team leader at work. I'm chaplain at the American Legion, so I lead a lot of guys. Again, the reason I brought this up to your attention because this is the second time that in my opinion, he's semi-attacked Scott. And I know Scott can handle this. Scott's had much worse than this. I have a lot of respect for Scott. But in the first time this occurred, I think the actual words were, he called him a liar and he couldn't be trusted. I didn't like that. Now, maybe that's par for before how these boards were done and how stuff's done. Maybe y'all are okay with that. I wasn't. That meeting had to be brought to order. The second time, he's never submitted anything to be put on the agenda. He started the disruption during citizens' comments. We're not even in the agenda items yet. And he started the disruption. He pushed the map towards Scott. And we're having this argument and debate to the point where he says, shame on you, Scott, and you, sir, have to call point of order. So I don't know. Maybe that's okay. I didn't like it.
Can I ask?
And all I want, I was actually very excited about this meeting. I've emailed you before about don't forget that we're here. We need issues. I look at the charter and kind of read it a little rigid, but the board has nicely said, let's not be that rigid. And I said, that's good. But we depend on you to give us things to research and to take care of and bring back to you. We're just advisory. So finally, working with Scott and one of the new board members here that's here tonight as well, Scott got with y'all and got this list together, and we're actually excited about getting that list started and working on those items. And to just start off that meeting, interrupted with, and again, I know all about passion. I believe in that concept. I believe in finding someone that has that passion. We call him a champion. Okay, who's the champion for this project? He's the one that's leading it. He's usually the one that's giving the energy to keep it going. He gathers good people around him. I understand that, and you have that. However, when that crosses into what happened at this last meeting, and again, his position is not even the association anymore. His position is at large. It's all the parks. And every time anything comes up, it's all about History Village. And that's fine. I know that's his passion. But there's more than one park. I came into this because I found out about the Veterans Park. But that's not my focus. My focus is I love Bowie as well. I had a major surgery. I used Bowie to get me back into health. I love Bowie. But it's all the parks. Okay? So I want not just productive meetings, but I want meetings that, I don't know, aren't like the ones in the past where everybody just gets to be disrespectful and somehow it just all works out. And when this meeting happened where, I don't know, if my skin needs to be thicker, let me know and I'll change. But I sent you the audio. Hopefully you listened to it.
Could we hear the audio?
Are we really going to play?
No, y'all, I sent it to you for a reason. I had hoped you had listened to it before you came here.
I did.
So if I'm overreacting, and by the way, when I sent this, I did not ask to have him removed. I asked, what's the process to do something about this member? Yes, I used the word censure removal. I don't know what that is. Maybe those were the wrong words. But normally, when something like this happens, we get together and we work this out. He's made no contact with me as chairman. And basically, it's like you heard tonight. It's like we just move on. Nothing, he didn't do anything wrong. And I don't know. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And if somebody else has a question, if you'll stay close, Mr. Hendricks. Can you stay close?
Right here.
Okay.
I want to be clear. I didn't say he didn't do anything wrong. I said he didn't do anything that, in my opinion, rises to the level of someone being censured or removed. Now, if that type of conduct continues and we don't see a change in it, then sure. I mean, if it continues to be disruptive, I wasn't at the meeting where I don't want to misquote what was said, but if there was talk of being a liar or what, I wasn't at that meeting. I didn't know that had occurred. So, the meeting that I was at, yes, he was trying to discuss History Village. He was trying to discuss a parking lot at History Village. He's passionate about that project. I get it. You know, I thought he was disrespectful. I did. I thought the conversation between he and Mr. Collins was not appropriate at that time. I did. But, you know, Mr. Collins handled it well. It's not the first time, I'm sure, that he's been in one of those heated exchanges, and probably won't be the last. You know, I'm not saying I condone that. I'm not saying that I condone the behavior that has occurred on this board in the past. I'm just saying it happens. And you go home and you look back and you reflect and you go, man, I could have handled that differently. You know, that's what you do. And I'm sure that's what Dr. Rice has done. So hopefully we won't have issues going forward. If we do, we can address them. You know, that's my opinion.
Dr. Rice, if you would like to read your comment.
To the members of the Fairview Board of Commissioners, good evening. Before I begin, let me assure you that I had no knowledge whatsoever that Lisa Anderson was going to be speaking this evening. I did not encourage her to speak. I did not help her in preparing her speech. I had no knowledge of the contents of her speaking. Having said that, let me begin. Thank you for providing this time for me to make some comments concerning the August 6, 2008 meeting of the Fairview Park Commission. During my remarks, it is my intention to be truthful and complete without using deception. I shall speak loudly and clearly so everyone in attendance and those who are watching by television can understand what I am saying. Please understand that while I am advancing in age, I can still see through a wire fence. Therefore, I am confident that each member of the Board of Commissioners, Mr. Collins, Mr. Hendricks, and I are fully aware of what this matter is really about. And it will become more apparent as I continue with my statement. When I was in advanced graduate school, pursuing the degree of Doctor of Philosophy, I was a serious student of the laws of logic and the procedural rules of argumentation and debate. Every competent attorney will be knowledgeable of the following principle. A text without a context is a pretext. Thus, the text lacks validity and reliability. Neither does such a text proclaim what it appears to proclaim, nor is it consistent. Consequently, a text without a context should never be given any consideration whatsoever. In my remarks which follow, it is my purpose to provide the needed context for Mr. Hendricks' accusations and to provide the needed background and historical information for purposes of explanation and clarification concerning my comments on August the 6th, 2018. While I request not to be interrupted when making this statement, I shall consider any questions when my statement has been read in full.
I'm going to interrupt just real quick. You sure you want to go forward and read your statement?
I surely do.
Okay.
I surely do, because I feel that I have gone through a character castigation, assassination, and yes, I do
Okay.
wish to read this in its entirety, and I assume 100% responsibility for this. Not one person assisted me in any way in the preparation of these comments.
Okay,
They
go
are
ahead
mine.
and proceed, please.
All right. Mr. Hendricks makes reference to proper procedure. Please let me mention the procedure that I tried to follow regarding this matter. It is a biblical instruction for resolving differences between individuals. First, discuss the matter privately with the individual. Second, if necessary, bring 2 or 3 witnesses and discuss the matter. And third, if still unresolved, discuss the matter with the individual before as large a group as is necessary. This is what I attempted to do, but Mr. Collins refused to meet with me privately following the meeting of August 6th. And what is ironic is that before the meeting even began, more than one person told me that Mr. Collins would never meet with me. Unfortunately, they were correct. What follows consists of 2 parts. First of all, some discussion regarding Mr. Hendricks and my association with him on the Park Commission. And secondly, my discussion includes some comments regarding some activities, or not activities, but some experiences I've had with Mr. Collins. Let me begin with Mr. Hendricks' email to you on August the 6th. Please know that while I cannot prove it, I sincerely believe that he had assistance in writing the email. Regardless, the comments which followed shall be related to his words and actions. In his statement of accusation, Mr. Hendricks is very imprecise and unclear with his usage of words. Please understand that I am being neither petty nor picky. Instead, I am discussing the essence of Mr. Hendricks' comments. He makes accusations but does not provide examples which supports his claim. For example, number 1, he uses the expression numerous occasions. I have some questions. Within what context? When? In response to what? How many? 2 or 200? He uses the word disruptive, but yet provides not one illustration of an example of my being disruptive. Why did it happen? What were the results? He uses the term uncooperative. With what? How did it happen? When did it happen? What were some specific examples? And then he likes to use the word personal and personally. I have some understanding of the English language, but that really perplexes me. Does Mr. Hendricks mean that I did something personally? Or does he mean that words were exchanged that attempted character assassination personal, as is being done to me at this very moment? Mr. Hendricks makes the remarkable claim of possessing the ability to read an individual's mind. You heard me right. Apparently, he has learned more from his psychiatrist friend than the value of heated discussion. Let me explain. Mr. Hendricks states his only interest is History Village. Without reading my mind, how could Mr. Hendricks possibly know the interests that I possess? Nonetheless, to this accusation, I respond, of course, guilty as accused. Consequently, I consider Mr. Hendricks' attempts to be accusatory as an offering of congratulations for doing what I was appointed to do. Please remember that like Richard Edmondson, who was appointed to the Park Commission as a representative of the Friends of Bowie Park, I was appointed as a representative of the Fairview Historical Association. I was chosen to represent the best interest of that association. Having served as founding chairman of the association for the past 11 years, our nonprofit group has raised more than $250,000 and restored and furnished 3 historical structures. Of the total amount raised, a considerable amount came from donations from me. Yes, it is true, I do attempt to represent the Historical Association as a member of the Park Commission. But not only do I disregard Mr. Hendrick's skill in mind reading, but I also challenge him to offer one example of one word or one behavior that I have uttered or done which reflect a lack of support for anything that has been proposed or done concerning Bowie Park or Veterans Park. For that matter, I would ask Mr. Hendricks to indicate those items that the Park Commission has accomplished for the entire Fairview Park system while he has served as chairman. His list will be very small and nearly non-existent. It has just been talk, and more talk. Mr. Hendricks accuses me of failing to follow procedure. Please let me provide some examples of how Mr. Hendricks fails to follow procedure, as well as the nature of how he conducts meetings.
Dr. Rice, I know you don't want to be interrupted, and I really didn't want to interrupt you, but I don't want it to be a personal. I just wanted you to have an opportunity to explain yourself. If Mr. Hendricks, was allowed to get up here, then you would be allowed to get up here. I don't know how much longer you're going, but if you would please cut out anything that was derogatory. I understand that you're answering an email, and I get you're hitting the points in your defense, and I'm glad for you to give your side. But please don't speak personally towards Mr. Hendricks. That's not how we're going to solve this.
I am attempting to speak concerning Mr. Hendricks' behavior. And that is what he has spoken of regarding me, I believe.
Okay, just make sure it's not personal.
Well, no attempt is to do that. I am trying to explain.
And I want you to have that opportunity. I really do. I just want to make sure that that this is not, just like you feel like in some way by this being put on the agenda, it's personal and a public attack. I don't really want you to feel like look back and be doing the same thing. Mr. Hendricks had a concern. He put it on the, sent it to the emails. Commissioner Burks decided to put it on the agenda. So, I mean, please continue with whatever you want, defending the email. But personally, I just can't sit here as somebody that has always had a lot of respect for you and let it go personal.
All right, let me continue and just simply raise a hand if you feel it's getting at that level, and I'll move to the next paragraph. How does that sound?
Okay, do we have?
All right. During one of our recent meetings, Mr. Hendricks was in a disagreement with another Park Commission member, not me, concerning his procedure for placing items on the agenda. He responded during the discussion, "If you don't like the way I run things during the meeting, I would just resign." And I would say that that didn't happen. During the meeting of August the 6th, Mr. Hendricks failed to observe proper BOC procedure, we're talking about procedure, by declaring that from this time forward, Mr. White would be designated as the representative from Friends of Bowie Park, and that a new citizen member would be found. This is a case where the ends do not justify the means, since it is the Board of Commissioners and not Mr. Hendricks or any other committee chairman who holds the authority to make appointments to the Park Commission. That's an example of his not following procedure. Let me give you some more examples.
Okay. I think it's probably best if you email whatever your statement is and let us move on to what the conversation, because as right now, there's not a motion on the table to have you removed. It's a discussion I'm bringing up, and I just would
May I
love
make
for.
just one more point?
Yeah, please,
Just
you
one.
sum it up. Yep.
Okay. And I haven't even got to such things as destroying the foundation and things of that sort, which are interesting. Mr. Hendricks' methods of administering procedure are dictatorial in style and of a military nature. To illustrate my concerns, I wish to read two quotations which have always been included in any email that I have received from Mr. Hendricks. The first is from the Austrian psychiatrist, Dr. Viktor Frankl. What is to give light must endure burning. Oh, I agree with that. In other words, good results come from heated discussion. I agree with that. Or it's like fire turning corrupt ore into pure gold. We understand that. Now listen to this. He says this from Sir Winston Churchill at the conclusion of World War I, if you have an important point to make, now we're talking about procedure, we're talking about the way meetings are run. If you have an important point to make, don't try to be subtle or clever, use a pile driver. Gee, that's kind of strong. Hit the point once, then come back and hit it again, then hit it a third time. That's how you make points. That's how you get your sense done. I would like to quote Mr. Churchill as I conclude, and I will decide either to have my complete remarks either in the Tennessean and the Observer or send them to you or all three. I would like to quote Mr. Churchill. It is obvious that Mr. Hendricks and my understanding of Churchill's messages are not the same. Never, never, never give up, except to convictions of honor and good sense. That's certainly what I am trying to do at this time. I feel that honor and good sense are very much involved in these accusations that have been made. And I haven't got to the heart of the matter yet. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have to say, I just wanted to allow you to have a chance to speak. Never do we want to take any volunteers and feel like this is some kind of trial or, you know, what's going on. The ideal is to find a better way if we are having issues. I do like what there was suggestion earlier, you know, sure, go to the commissioner on the board, come up with a reason. All I know is, Dr. Rice, what you've done volunteering and through the years, I respect that, and I respect your passion. I did listen to the tape, and I do know that you can get very disruptive when you're passionate about it. And it was a little over the board, but I know you well enough and know your love for the community, and you wanted to just be heard, and I get that. As a chair, I applaud Mr. Hendricks as how he handled the situation. He did try to bring order back in and resume the meeting, and he did a great job. And I know personalities are going to hit, and there's going to be conflicts, as Vice Mayor Crutcher said. We've seen it happen before. I really didn't want to be a judge of, you know, the meeting, or do I think it's our place. But what we would like is a common ground made and a productive board. So whether the board decides in a minute to have a vote on a procedure or wants to do something else, then that'll be fine. But I just know both of you, and I know y'all are both upstanding men and have tried to be passionate and serve their communities. And I thank you for that. And I'm sorry if I allowed these personal comments to be here tonight. Yes. Vice Mayor.
Me or Dr. Rice? Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
You know, before Dr. Rice's comments, I was an advocate for this board staying in existence and us moving forward and trying to get past this. In light of Dr. Rice's comments, which I hoped he wouldn't give, I'm now convinced there's no way that this board can operate and be effective whatsoever with its current makeup. It's just obvious, and if that's not apparent, I don't know what is. So in light of that, I just move that we suspend all further activities of the park board pending further resolution or direction from this board.
Is that a motion?
I said I moved.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you. Do you have a second?
I'll second that to move it to discussion.
Okay, we got a first and second?
Mayor,
Yes.
I think that the park board has just now been given assignments and things that they can kind of look forward to working on and doing. I think to disband that board at this point in time without giving them a chance to even do what they were originally set up to do is not what this board should do. I would think that everyone's kind of had their say, and maybe we could hope that they could have at least one more meeting and see if they could work on a productive plan. And then feel free to bring it back to this board if there's still a member that's being disruptive, refusing to put things on the agenda, but insist on discussing those things. I just think that the park board has great potential at this point in time. And I think that we should give them an opportunity to be professional and do their jobs and find a path to do that. The end.
Yes.
I'm not opposed to that. I just, it's apparent to me, based on the discussion that we've had, that it seems like there's a bridge that, or excuse me, a gap that we can't bridge here. I hope that wasn't the case when I started all this conversation earlier, but now that we've gone through it for 30 minutes, it's apparent to me. You know, I guess the question is to ask the two individuals, do they want to continue to serve on the park board with one another? It doesn't appear, it appears the problems between the park board consist of 5 people. And right now we have 2 that have an issue. I don't know if they even want to serve with one another going forward. I haven't heard that.
Well, I do agree with Commissioner Rainey. I mean, I think there is a purpose. I think it would take us backwards. I hope that y'all can figure it out and work together. If not, we probably need to look at replacing. All our boards go, or supposedly go by Robert Rules of Order, and the chair has the right to, redirect something. And I think Mr. Hendricks did it appropriately and is doing a good job as a chair. I do think that I would love to see them to work this out and take the personal aside and take their passion and look at it. When we formed this board, it was set up a little bit different, but it's still the same concept. We looked at all our parks as a park system. So we had Veterans Park, we had Friends of the Bowie Park, we had, historic, society, is that right? Give me a yes or no. Okay, yes. And then we had we just, and then a citizen at large, we formed it. The idea was, let's talk about all the parks. It's a system. And so that's what the intent was. Now, we have, in the last couple of years, made some changes, but they changed them to at-large positions, and they lowered the members, and we, lowered the members. And with that being said, it kind of, you weren't necessarily the representative of that board anymore, but they kept those representatives there. And so Dr. Rice was still here, and there was a few members that rolled off, but we had Richard Edmondson. He was still there. So we had some representation from those boards. So the ideal is that we not look at something as just Bowie Park. We look at it as park system, all of our parks, and we try to be productive. Things do have to be put on the agenda or spoke about in appropriate places. And it is the privy of the chair or to make those decisions. So with that being said, I'd love for y'all to figure it out. If not, we'll be glad to try to open it up where we come up with some kind of process to replace members. I don't think anybody should have to come and be made to feel bad about themselves. And I surely don't want anybody to feel attacked. So if we can't do that, then I say we look at it again. If y'all can, like I said, I like both of these gentlemen, and it's just business is business. We need to move forward for business of the city, and if we can't, then let's get some different representatives that can represent the park. And just do the business of the city is where I feel. Any other discussions? Yes, Commissioner Burks.
Mayor, first let me say, I don't know Mr. Hendricks. I don't know Mr. Rice. I have no personal animosity towards anybody. I don't have any personal likes towards anybody. I don't know either of you gentlemen. However, we were approached by the chairperson of one of our boards and commissions who had an issue with being able to run his meeting. I wish there was a better process in place, but we really don't have one. We can't really have a discussion outside of a meeting, so this is kind of what we're stuck with. And I take it seriously when the chairperson of one of our committees says, we cannot run our committee. They can't do what we've tasked them to do. And I understand Mr. Hendricks when he says he was excited about this meeting because they're getting to do something. We're bringing things to them to discuss so they can try to make some decisions amongst themselves to help guide us in how they think the park system should go forward. And I think that's important. Our park system is very important to us. It's important to our community, and it brings people here. I don't think that should be disbanded. And I know that this whole situation was not easy for Mr. Hendricks to have to bring forward. It's not comfortable. A lot of people don't like to deal with these things, but he did what he had to do for his committee to move forward. He was given the opportunity to say, this is why I had to bring this forward. Dr. Rice responded. I didn't know what to do with this situation other than put it up here and let us figure it out. In theory, adults should be able to work through their problems and figure it out, but that requires everyone to be reasonable. And sometimes passion gets in the way of that. I appreciate passion. I appreciate every one of our citizens who step up, volunteer to help the city. It's time consuming. It's a pain in the rear sometimes, but it's something that we really need help from the citizens to do. We need people to step forward and volunteer their time. But at the same time, we can't have our meetings go like they were in the past. And I know, Mr. Crutcher, I know what type of meetings you're talking about. We used to have to sit through and watch them, and you had to sit through, and the mayor had to experience them. However, we should be moving beyond that. That should not be the norm. We shouldn't be attacking each other in a meeting. We shouldn't be pointing our fingers and yelling at people in meetings. We shouldn't be getting up and walking out of meetings. That's not professional. Everyone in these commissions should act as a professional. Treat each other as they want to be treated. The golden rule applies. If someone can't do that, then we have a problem. I listened to Dr. Rice get up here and give his statement. And to me, it came off as belittling, attacking someone's grammar in an attempt to belittle. Maybe that's not how you intended it, Dr. Rice, but that's how it came off to me. I agree with Mr. Crutcher in that I don't know how these parties go forward trying to work together, because it seems like that working relationship's just kind of been set on fire and destroyed. So I would like to see if there's a way they can work it out, but I don't think they can based on the statements.
Well, I believe Mr. Rice wants some answers, and I think the answers what he's wanting is probably from Mr. Collins, and it was probably brought at inappropriate times when they were in a meeting. And I'm sure if you provide us a list, we can come up with what's the answers to some of your questions and move on. I get it. I've talked to you enough to know that you just have passion and you're all for your project, but it still goes back to we got to follow the procedures of the meeting. And if it's not on the agenda, then that's not the appropriate time. So I just asked you to give us an email of some of your questions, maybe city staff, commissioners can see, and we'll be happy to answer your questions and try to see if we can help. But the best thing is, unless it's an agenda item and you're going to continue on the board, then you need to save it for the appropriate times. So that's where I would go. And then we'll definitely, if there are some legitimate concerns, we would love to try to figure that out. Yes.
Just real quick, one thing. Again, my motion, I don't care what we do with it. It's not going to hurt my feelings one way or the other. I was trying to offer a solution. It's clear that we have a problem. We've done a lot of talking about it. I'm trying to offer a solution. I'm not inclined or don't want to have to vote to kick somebody off the island, so to speak. I was hoping, like I said, that these two would be able to work this issue out and we wouldn't have this problem going forward. Then we got into the comments, and I agree with Commissioner Burks. We got in, and that's why I asked him if he wanted to continue, because we got into this personal attack, belittling. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me, and it really wasn't helpful. It wasn't helpful to me. I don't know about the rest of you, but it really wasn't helpful for me in trying to make any determination in this. The questions that Dr. Rice has, I can answer in about 2 minutes. The parking lot, we can't do it right now. There's no money to do a parking lot. That was what started the whole debate the other night, was a parking lot, okay? There was this drawing, what it was intended to look like, parking lot, the cost of the parking lot. It's not in this year's budget. Maybe it'll be in future budgets, but it's not in this year's budget. That answers the parking lot question. 2, items were being allegedly moved that didn't belong to the chamber, that were in the chamber's office. Mr. Dawson with the chamber has sent an email to us. I'm sure everybody has read it. I hope those issues have been remedied. I suggested to Dr. Rice and the Historical Association to go out there and do an inventory of what property's there, because I didn't even know if that existed, so that we'll know what actually belongs to the Historical Association, and that those items then can be identified, inventory listed, and know where they are. I've told that the issues with the items that's been resolved. That's number 2. Number 3, the issue with the foundation. There's varying stories on what happened with this foundation, and it depends on who you listen to as to what you're told. I was told that by Dr. Rice that the foundation there was a permit application, that it was permitted, that it was approved, and that somebody within codes did all of that and gave them permission to go construct this foundation on city property. Now, I don't know how that happened. I don't know what the process for that was. I don't understand how anybody a nonprofit or otherwise, can go and construct something on city property without this board having to vote on it. But it happened. So there's this foundation that exists. Then there's this request for funding to build a $50,000 log cabin on it that was not part of anything that had been approved by this board. So now we have a foundation, no funding to build the cabin, no funding in sight, or we don't know when that'll happen, a foundation. The foundation was removed by the administration. It's my understanding that that foundation is stored, that the blocks are stored, that the actual footer is still there. You just simply scrape the dirt off that was used to cover it. You put your blocks back down, put some mortar down, and that issue is resolved. I understand the Historical Association paid for it. We can talk about the cost of replacing that foundation when and if that time comes. I would suggest that we talk about that when we have the money to build the cabin, not before. I think we put the cart before the horse. The third item, or the fourth item, I think, was the detention pond. It's my understanding that the city engineer has been out there to look at the detention pond, because when these questions came up, I asked about them the very next day, which is what I told Dr. Rice and Ms. Anderson I would do. The detention pond, I was told that the city engineer says that that does not require a detention pond, that it was a trench that was dug to collect water from runoff. But it's my understanding that based on the dimensions, the water runoff, that it's not something that requires a detention pond. I said it would take me 3 minutes. That might have taken me 5, but those were all the issues presented to me, and I hope that I've answered them. That's all I have.
And Vice Mayor, I believe I've heard all those answers since I've been here. So those answers have been in the public before.
I do believe the prior board did have the foundation and the conversations of the cabin. Without looking up at the minutes, there was a list of things that were to be done with the money. And so that would be a discussion if we wanted to clarify. But it's not like Dr. Rice went out and had a foundation poured that nobody knew about. It was brought up in meetings and brought to the board.
I'm not suggesting that that's what happened.
Okay.
Please. That's not what I'm suggesting.
Since I had the knowledge, wanted to clarify it. I can't answer all the questions, but some things I do recall. So,
Mayor, I think
Yes.
that Commissioner Burks brings up a good point, that we've had a chairman of a committee come to us, and our job is kind of to hear that and somehow act on that. And I think that's kind of our obligation.
okay, well, the motion on the floor was, if you'll remind me.
It was just to suspend all activity of the park board. It wasn't to disband the park board, I want to clarify. It was to suspend all activity pending further order, or maybe order is not the proper word, of this board.
I would hate to see us go that direction.
Mayor, I'd call the vote on the motion before the board.
And in fact, I'll, after the discussion, I'll withdraw the motion, if that's not the...
I'll withdraw my second then.
Okay. This is discussion, so if we want to come up with a means or a solution and provide it for them, we can, but there's really not, I guess we could take a vote, but it doesn't call for any action. Yes.
First, let me just say, I think this whole thing is sad. It really does actually makes me sad that we're sitting here debating this. I agree with Vice Mayor. Dr. Rice, I don't really know you. I've met you a couple of times. But I agree with the Vice Mayor. I was inclined, if a vote came up, to not vote to remove you. And then you gave your statement, and that completely changed for me. I'm not saying I would vote to remove you, but it became a question for me. I would suggest that at this point, I don't know how y'all work together moving forward, but rather than disband the park board at this point or dissolve it or any of those things, when is the next park board meeting? Yeah, I would almost suggest that we let another meeting go, another 2 meetings go, and if we need to address it then, we address it then, and hope that, both gentlemen can move on, put this behind them and move on to, the business of the city and again, put this behind them. So, but again, it makes me sad on a lot of levels to have to hear what we heard tonight. I was hoping that we were, as a city, a lot farther past that. And so it was just, for me, it was sad. So that would be my suggestion, is that we let them have some meetings, and if there continues to be an issue, the chairman go through vice mayor, and the vice mayor bring that towards us, or to us, excuse me, and go from there.
I agree. Like it was stated earlier, everybody serves at the will of the board, so there's not really a process, but I do like the fact if there is problems on a committee, that it can be brought back to us and we can address it and move on. So, yes, Commissioner Burks.
Mayor, I like the suggestion from Commissioner Lucas. I'd like to see the park board have another meeting. We just need everyone to compose themselves in a professional manner. I work with criminals, and I'm able to have a professional relationship with criminals. So I would hope the two of you and everyone else on the board can work in a professional manner. There's a goal to help the park system and to help that move forward. But we can't have disruptive meetings. We need everyone to work towards being on task. If you have an item you want to discuss, ask that it be placed on the agenda appropriately. Then I assume the chairman will call that item up and it'll be discussed by the whole board. But I need, Dr. Rice, I need you just to be polite to guests that are there. I need other members to be polite to you. If the city manager comes, he's taking his time to come to that board. Be respectful of that. If you don't have to like Mr. Collins, that's okay. I don't like the criminal clients I necessarily work with. But we're respectful because we have to work together. So that's what we need to have occur. And I'm not comparing anyone to a criminal. I'm just saying if I can deal with a criminal in that manner, then gentlemen should be able to deal with each other as such.
Alleged.
Right.
Prior to conviction. So, on that matter, I would just ask that we close this discussion and move forward. However, if this continues to be an issue, then I expect the chairperson of this committee or any committee to bring it back to our attention, and at that point, we will deal with it and be done.
Okay, so we're moving on to
B.
B, 12B, Triangle School event and uses.
Madam Mayor, this is also an item asked to be placed on the agenda. We have History Village. The only people that use it is the United Way when they had the tax service that was present, which was a great thing. Thank you. We have the Chamber of Commerce out there so that it's actually open now during the day at certain times. So if anybody wants to stop in and see it, they can. We had events there from the Veterans Day Parade. I believe it was Veterans Day. Is that right? Okay. I couldn't remember if it was Memorial Veterans, I'm sorry. However, outside of that, this building's not receiving any use. This building requires upkeep and maintenance, and I'd like to see it help take care of itself. I would suggest that this board discuss some ways this building can be used. I don't know if anyone's asked to actually tour this building. Mr. Collins, do you know?
Mr. Burks, I have had one request.
Okay. Was that by an organization, a school, or an individual?
That was by an individual.
Okay. I've been out to the History Village. It's neat. I like it. However, having gone through it and seen it, I don't know that I'd ever have the need to go back to it unless there's some event there. I mean, in essence, we're talking about 2 large rooms. I know some people that actually went to school there that have no interest in going. And I'm not saying that to belittle this item. I think it's a very neat item. However, I think if we can find some ways to bring people to History Village, then that would be good. One item I think would be useful is, like we rent out pavilions at the park, we could rent out the space for use on weekends. If somebody wanted to have a wedding shower, a baby shower, I think, or birthday party, whatever it may be, as long as they're respectful of the space, we could do that. It would bring in some money to help take care, fund maintenance, and some of those things. Also, it would get some people actually there. I know I've asked to tour it, and I believe Commissioner Lucas did, and this was before it was open. We've spent a lot of money on this project. People have donated a lot of money to this project. It needs to be used. I don't care how we get people there, but we need to use it. If we want to have a food truck Saturday, have food trucks outside to get people to that area, that'd be great.
That's a great idea.
I know we can't afford a parking lot right now. I get that. But people can park on grass. They can come, hang out. I know we have a suggestion that's been made to the park board of perhaps doing pavilions out there for places for people to come sit. I just want to hear some ideas. What can we do to utilize this space and hopefully bring some money in to help maintain it? Because old buildings are not easy to maintain. It's not cheap. It's not inexpensive. So I'd like to pass it to the rest of the board. Let's brainstorm and get some ideas.
Can we put that on one of our workshop brainstorming sessions instead of doing it during the meeting?
I'm happy to do it however, and if any citizens have ideas, email them to us, take them to the park board. I'd like to see the park board come up with some suggestions on what they think are appropriate uses of this building and to bring them to us. I want to see this property used. Unfortunately, the 2 most interesting buildings we can't get into. You have to kind of look in through a window. But that's just my thought. But I'm happy if we could put this on a workshop, Mr. Collins, if that's what the board wants to do. I just want to get something in place. Let's get an inflatable movie screen. Let's have some movies out there. Let's have some kids out there. Let's get the snow cone vendor out there. Let's find a way to get people there.
I think that one of the things we've discussed is using some of the tree fund money to hire a landscape architect and put on paper, what everybody has a vision of it looking like, and put on paper so that we can work toward that, maybe over a 3, 5, 6 year time period, so that it's not just a hot field off 100 Highway, because, right now it doesn't look like any place you want to go and wander through. But can we put that on the agenda for a workshop, and that will give people time to email us with ideas? We can bring all those back. Mr. Collins, can we do that?
Yes, Commissioner Rainey, we can.
Can we do it like the second meeting in September? That will give us time to get ideas.
Yes, we can.
10-4.
Well, I did want to throw one comment. It was never intended for this not to be a youth space. The ideal of parks and renting it out was always the original intent. But what's happened is the holdup through the year was who's going to open it. We don't have a use of facility or rental form. So getting some of those things together, along with our ideals, then we need to come up with, are we going to require a lease agreement or, event agreement? So those are all things we can talk about in the workshop. But the intent was not for the Historical Society to put this together and no one ever come. They wanted to preserve the history, and the events like the Veterans Day was perfect. It was open up, people got to see it. They dreamed of a meeting room that it would still be used, and so I think it was never their intent. This has been years and years of a project, and it carries a lot of frustration, and I hate that, but it has been a funding issue along the way, and the city has put a lot of money in it over the years, but then also so has the citizens and the board, and they did some fundraising and stuff like that. Auction, I know several times they had auctions. So a lot of love, sweat, and tears. So all for trying to find a way to make it a usable space, and making sure that they are along with us. You know, it's so easy to say this one building's done, we don't have any money, so let's push this to the side, you know. But the thing about it is, you understand why people are so passionate about something when it took years. It wasn't a one-year process. I mean, we're talking years. This has been agenda items. So let's get it working and going. Maybe we can figure out ways that we could speed it up, you know, and that would be great. Yes.
Madam Mayor, Mr. White, if you would make sure this is put on your next agenda so that we don't miss a meeting, go and get some of this done. Some things you might want to consider: book readings, lecture series, anything like that. Get with the library. Maybe they have some ideas. Let's get a reason for people to see it. We've made this investment in our community. Let's use it.
Well, and also right now several of our groups, like the senior and the FCE, they're being displaced from the rec center during the renovation. You know, it might be a great solution that some of these groups might be able to use the space until, you know, things are figured out. Don't know if it's necessary or not, but it's something we can talk about. Okay, no motion necessary. Are we done with discussion? Huh? Is it 9? We're moving it up. Okay, so we have had a request for a break. And so we will take a break. Okay, we're gonna bring the meeting back to order, and we left off at 12C.
Are we going to read these collectively? Is it one time? I think it's one agenda item. I just want to make sure.
Commissioner, they're.
Individually?
I'm sorry? Individually, yes, sir, because they're individual
Okay,
ordinances
that's
or
what we'll do.
resolution.
You just take the whole thing, it'll be easier.
Ordinance 2018-14, an ordinance renumbering certain sections of Title 17 entitled Refuse, Garbage, and Trash Disposal of the City of Fairview Municipal Code. Move to approve.
Second.
First and second, any discussion? Okay, you want me to roll call this too? I guess I need to. Vice Mayor Crutcher,
Aye.
Commissioner Rainey,
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks,
Aye.
and my vote's aye.
Ordinance 2018-15, an ordinance amending City of Fairview Municipal Code, Section 17-101, entitled Definitions to include paragraph 8, defining brush and chipper waste. Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Vice Mayor Crutcher.
Aye.
Oh, did we have any discussion? I'm sorry. Okay, Vice Mayor Crutcher.
Aye.
Commissioner Rainey,
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks,
Aye.
and my vote's aye.
Ordinance 2018-16, an ordinance establishing operational rules and guidelines for brush, materials, and debris to be processed by the city's chipper service. Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, first and second. Any discussion? Vice Mayor Crutcher,
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
Commissioner Rainey,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks,
Aye.
and my vote's aye.
Resolution 24-18, a resolution of the City of Fairview, Tennessee, establishing the review of routes for its residential chipper service and for the continuing consideration of the chipper service regarding residential developments. Move to approve.
Second.
Got a first and second. Any discussion? Okay, going to vote. Vice Mayor Crutcher,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks,
Aye.
Commissioner Rainey,
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
and my vote's aye.
Ordinance 2018-17, an ordinance amending City of Fairview Municipal Code, Section 17-110, entitled Violations to include brush and chipper waste. Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, first and second. Any discussion? Vice Mayor Crutcher,
Aye.
Commissioner Rainey,
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks,
Aye.
and my vote's aye. Okay, and that brings us to 12D, ordinance 2018-12.
An ordinance to repeal Section 11-806 of the City of Fairview Municipal Code as written and to reserve Section 11-806 of the Fairview Municipal Code. Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, first and second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor, if we could have the city manager explain what we're repealing real quick.
Yes.
Yes, Mayor, members of the board, what you're repealing tonight will lead way to the next agenda item. I apologize. There was some discussion about the smoking on city properties. The current city ordinance, 11-806, states specifically that smoking is prohibited at public meetings at City Hall. That's the only matter we have before the city regarding any ordinance that specifies smoking in any city property. We want to amend that to restrict or to ban smoking on any city property. In order to do that, the easiest process is to repeal 11-806 in favor of a new ordinance that would replace the smoking ban, as it were.
Call to question.
Okay. Fine, go ahead. Commissioner, Vice Mayor Crutcher,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks,
Aye.
Commissioner Rainey,
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
and my vote's aye. 12E,
Ordinance 2018-13, an ordinance to ban smoking on all property owned by the city of Fairview and within all assets, facilities, and structures owned by the city of Fairview, and to establish a fine for violations of the city's ban on smoking on city-owned properties and within city-owned assets. Move to approve.
Second.
okay, we have a first and second. Any discussion? Okay, Vice Mayor Crutcher,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rainey, hello, I promoted
I've
you.
been promoted.
Commissioner Rainey,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks,
Aye.
and Commissioner Lucas.
Aye.
And my vote's aye. 12F, a resolution 22-18.
A resolution of the City of Fairview, Tennessee, designating certain items as surplus and authorizing their disposal, fire department tools, and equipment. Move to approve.
Second.
Got a first and second. Any discussion? Vice Mayor Crutcher,
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
Commissioner Rainey,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks.
Aye.
And my vote's aye. New business, 12G, Resolution 23-18.
A resolution of the City of Fairview accepting the lowest bid proposal for financing the 2018 fire pumper truck and authorizing the city manager to execute the financing documents. Move to approve.
Second.
First and second, any discussion?
Mayor, members of the board, one item for you regarding that. We do request that this be approved. First Bank was the lowest bidder with a 10-year fixed rate of 2.95%. So we're comfortable with that rate and the terms of that. I will tell you, there's some flexibility in this. Before we sign the documents officially, I'll get this information back to you. But you may recall that the city budgeted this over 10 years at $45,000 per year, beginning to spend that $45,000 in the current budget year. The proposal that we have assigns the first fixed-rate payment in August of 2019. So as we move forward with this, we will either pay, and we budgeted this at $45,000 per year. So the requirement that we have at closing, I believe, is $1,065 that we pay at closing for this financing, which is fine. But as we look at cash flow, we may take this year's budgeted payment, put that money down toward this payment, so we're not 11-year financing effectively of the 10-year truck. So as you read the documents and it states the first payment shall be due August of 2019, we likely will make that in advance, so we don't extend the payment 11 years on the 10-year budget cycle for those purposes. So just if you read those documents or you see those and it states August of 19, we understand that. But we will likely move that ahead 1 year to stay within our current budget and the life cycle of the vehicle.
Okay, any other discussion? Vice Mayor Crutcher?
Aye.
Okay, and who's my second? Commissioner Rainey, and then Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks,
Aye.
and my vote's aye. Item 13, city managers, items for discussion.
Mayor, members of the board, just one thing to clarify that was brought about during tonight's meeting, and not to revisit all that took place, but regarding History Village and the Triangle School itself. When I arrived here, in August of 2016, it was my understanding that there had already been an open house for the Triangle School, which took place sometime before that, I believe about a year before, sometime in 2015. Within that, the city had funded some money toward that school, toward the project, and there was a balance of about $6,000 left in that money that the city had provided to the Fairview Historical Association. The discussion, when I arrived, that was the topic of discussion at the time was the installation of this structure or the other building, the cabin, that was out there and the construction of the foundation for that, which had been paid for out of the funds the city had provided to the Historical Association at a cost of about $2,500. That's my initial discussion on where we were. As we got into that, the question was, what is it going to take to get the school open, given the fact that we had already had an open house, but the school was not available to be opened? There were a series of things that needed to be repaired or addressed to get there. In fact, we had an open house without having a CO issued by the city for an inspection of the building. So at that time, we had electrical issues and the fact that there was no electrical, plumbing issues, in fact, there was no plumbing to the building, including toilets, hot water, or any other plumbing material. In fact, water and sewer had not even been connected to the building or had not even installed even a meter or a sewer pump. The underpinning of the building had not been performed. In fact, it had not been there. The interior lighting was not to code, was not UL listed, and had to be redone. The insulation to be included under the building had not been installed, and the accessible handicap rails to the building had not been installed. At that time, the decision was made to request that the Fairview Historical Association remit their balance, which I believe was $5,400, to the city, so the city may move forward with the actual completion of these items, which in fact we did recover. At that point, this body, the board, allocated an additional $10,000 out of the general fund so that we may move forward and make all of the additional repairs that needed to be made to get the building open, and that's what we did. So we moved forward with that. We got the building up to code, got it inspected, and that's where we are today. As I understand it, there are 3 items left that had been discussed over that period of time, and those were parking, the question of parking at the site, this detention pond issue, and security lighting in the area. The least of which is the security lighting. We did go back and upgrade the lights around the building to make sure that the front door was lit, the back door was lit. As a matter of fact, those lights are to stay on. If you go by the school, those lights will be on at night, or they should be, as we leave that open. So it's secure but not intrusive, or the question that we had was the use of pollution-oriented lighting for a facility that was not in use. So that's how we addressed the lighting at the building. The second issue we had was the parking. The proposal that I saw a couple of times that we had discussions about was resulted in a cost of about $135,000 for parking. The question that we had at the time was the stone or gravel parking versus installing a parking lot that would meet the current city code. If you're going to install a parking lot, you have to install curb, gutter, striping, drainage, all of the things that come with that. As Commissioner, well, let me back up. As we get to that, those are our issues that have to be addressed on site. Commissioner Crutcher in our park board meeting mentioned that, and that's kind of what led to the thing is where we got there to have a problem. So there's been no interest to not do those things. There's actually been an interest to those, but it's a can we versus should we as it relates to the budget. The last thing that I want to address, and we'll take care of this on our side, but there's been some discussion back and forth about this detention pond, and I believe one of the speakers who spoke to you tonight mentioned that there was some liability on the city regarding the lack of a fencing around the detention pond. I can submit to you tonight that I'm not aware of any document anywhere where a detention pond was ever built, created, engineered, designed, approved, or otherwise brought before this board or any other to be built or constructed as a detention pond on that site. Secondly, I'm not aware of any site plan approved by the Planning Commission, the staff, or this board regarding those things where they would require those types of infrastructure. So as we move forward, what we really have is a pond. It's not a detention pond. We just move some dirt and it holds some water until we go forward. So what I will do as a part of that to answer that question is get with our engineers for a second time, determine whether or not that site actually requires a detention pond. The initial estimation was that it did not require a detention pond based on the level of runoff. The pond that's on site now was constructed by our staff through no approval process about 10 years ago when this project started as a part of moving sheeting water flow from across the property to the site where the school would be and removing it from there. So as we get into that process, we will go back and check and see if there are any permits, approved site plans, or lack of those as we get through, and we'll be hesitant to call what's really a pond or a place that water pools as a detention pond and accept some sort of liability for that thing. So as we get forward, we'll get those questions answered. We'll likely have those questions answered, if we can, at the second meeting in September, along with the matters to come before the park board, so we can see where we are, in fact, from a legal standpoint and an engineering standpoint. I would also submit to you that there's nothing that has been submitted to me or the city, or that I've seen in any document, that identifies that site as requiring a fencing, because it's not a constructed, designed, or otherwise professionally engineered detention pond. So the assessment that the city bears some liability as that property exists today has no more liability than any lake on any park or any property that we have anywhere. And there's no discharge point where we would have to restrict the water flow to another property. So as we go in, we'll pull that up, and we'll make sure we get those things right. Those are questions that needs to be answered. I want to be respectful of that process historically and going forward. That's been the intent. That will continue to be the intent. We'll have those answers for you before we make any further decisions. So that's all I have for you tonight.
City Attorney, do you have anything for us tonight? Commissioner Rainey.
Can I ask a question of the city manager?
Sure.
The log cabin that we've never put up at History Village, is there a Fairview what is that? That's the best question I can give.
To my knowledge, no one's expressed to me any Fairview Historical Association to that cabin. I think it's a cabin that's actually located in another county. The intent was to put it there, build the foundation, and bring it there. I think there was a question about cost at the time. The short answer to your question is I'm not aware of any connection to Fairview. I will tell you that the foundation, as constructed, still exists. The question that fell before us was when we got to the Veterans Parade last year, Veterans Day Parade, there was a question of events that took place there with all the activity. What we did not want to have was the appearance that there was a failed project at History Village, first. Secondly, we did not want to have an incomplete project that lent itself to being a hazard or some type of injurious situation for some visitor there. Based on those two factors, we removed all of the structure above grade. All of the cinder block and everything that was there above the grade surface of the foundation was removed and is being stored at Public Works. The grade work, the foundation itself that was constructed, was not harmed, altered, moved, or in any way damaged. We simply put sod on the top of it to make it appear as if it was a part of the existing grass. As a matter of fact, if you visit the site any day, you'll notice that you can find where that is, because the grass is different on that square where that property is, and it's not fully grown in to meet the other because of the depth of the grass.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lucas.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to end on a positive note. Yellow Jacket football starts tomorrow night. Battle at 8:40. It's a big event. I think it's the one thing that all of us in Fairview actually come together for and are on the same team about. So if you're free tomorrow night, come out. I believe it's still going to be at Page High School. They have a new field, so it should be exciting. So hopefully we'll see everybody out there tomorrow night. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Burks.
Again, I want to say thank you to everyone who volunteers to serve on a committee or a commission. It's a lot of work, it's time consuming, and there's not always a lot of thanks. So I want to say thank you. That being said, everybody just needs to be professional in how they interact with each other. It's not that hard. Just be polite, if nothing else. Mr. Collins, I would also like us to explore some kind of wastewater ordinance. It doesn't have to be an MS4. I don't know if there's a way we can do something much smaller than that, or if we're stuck having it's an all or nothing. Obviously, we can't afford to staff a position now, based on our size and our budget. But there's something that we can do that's easier, and that may be a relative term, but something that we can do to help out. Let's explore some options. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Crutcher.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, one thing, I don't know if everybody's had a chance to go out and look at the press box at the high school. It was brought to my attention last week by Chris Hughes, the football coach, and others there that there's some issues with the construction of that press box. Obviously, the city wasn't involved in the construction of the press box. However, the city was involved in the funds that were paid to the county to build that press box. And if you get a chance, go by and look at it. I'm sure Coach Hughes would be happy to let you in, let you take a look at the product that they got. It's concerning. It certainly doesn't look like, I think we donated a couple $100,000 and we didn't get a couple $100,000 worth of work. So just take a look at it. I don't know what the remedy is, but we need to talk about it.
Okay. Thank you. Just real quick, I do want to acknowledge what Mr. Collins was saying. He is 100% correct. When he came, that was a steel project. And I know that when him and Keith kind of took it back over and followed through, made sure everything got done, and now it is a usable space. And it always comes down to budgetary issues, whether or not we can take something so far. But, really, we may have been still sitting here if they didn't take it over and push it forward. So, I know that some things in time gets lost, and people don't always remember the good, and especially when you have history versus coming in new, that it's real easy to get defensive or even think things are intentional. And I know in no way was that ever. It is city property, and we are required to maintain and to keep it up. So, I hate it tonight too. Like with Commissioner Lucas, I really don't think it should have been an agenda item, and then, bringing people up and kind of it's always awkward. But I know things need to be discussed sometimes, especially if there's a problem going on the city. But, hopefully this will work out. Encourage anybody and everybody. We need our volunteers, and we never want anybody to walk away feeling not respected. And because it's their time. They've given their time. And I know I served on a board before I became an elected official. I know a couple of, Commissioner Rainey has. There's years that you just give your time, and you don't want to you want to make sure that it's valued. And so we never want anybody to feel that way. And I just hope that they can work it out and we can move forward. If not, we'll, go from there and make decisions. As many of y'all know, just wanted to say, I guess I am not running or seeking re-election. I don't have a long speech. I just want to say thank you. It's been my honor to serve the citizens of Fairview, and I'm sure I'll say that again in November. But I just wanted to thank you for the support and the love over the years, and I look forward to an interesting next couple months, and I always love the fact that people want to serve and give up their lives to do so. So anyway, get out and vote, and thank you for tonight. I'm sorry it's long. If I can get a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.